I'd like to discuss political culture and participation in Mexico. Beginning with the civil rights and civil liberties in Mexico, Mexicans have the freedom of expression to express their views on certain subjects, the freedom of the press to write and report on certain topics regarding the government. This in practice, though, there are a lot of issues in using this freedom in practice, however. And Mexicans have the right to peaceably assemble to show support for certain ideas. When I talked about freedom of the press and the issues in practicality, there were 148 journalists killed from 2000 to 2018. 21 additional journalists disappeared in those years, and 9 of those 148 journalists who were killed were killed in 2018 alone. So this just shows a large issue in Mexico, especially when corruption in local areas or something regarding a drug cartel is to be written and reported on. Well, there are just these issues with the killings and the disappearings from these individuals that really makes the freedom of the press something that that protection or that freedom might not be as strong in practice as it is written and believed to be followed in Mexico. So, something the Mexican government did to help protect journalists, well, was to create the Federal Protection Mechanism for Human Rights Defenders and Journalists. So, human rights defenders and journalists have safety alerts if they're in trouble, safe houses to go to, and bodyguards when trying to report on certain things, which can help journalists. However, in 2019, 5 journalists were assassinated. So that death number 9 in 2018 going down by 4 for 2019, well, that just shows there's still quite a big problem because 5 journalists dying, even though there's freedom of the press, that number should be 0 if there really is true freedom of the press. Now, also looking at the divisions in Mexico, the real division that I want to, there are 2 main divisions I want to look at here: North versus South, and Indigenous versus mixed, like Spanish roots from Spain, and then Indigenous roots in Mexico. So, starting off with the North versus South, 47% of people are declared poor in the South, compared to 12% of the people in the North are declared, like, quotes, poor, considered poor. So that just shows the economy in the South isn't as strong as in the North. One of the reasons for this is there's much more spread out population in the South, meaning it's harder to, well, have a lot of investment in the region. If you can't simply do it in one area, you have to do it in multiple areas. There is more issues. Another part of this is the agricultural subsidies are stronger in the North than in the South. One part of this was with NAFTA. Well, now the United States Mexico Canada deal. Some communal farm ownership was not allowed in southern Mexico, where a lot of indigenous people, use those processes before NAFTA. And without that, it's much harder for the indigenous people or the poor people to gain profit from agricultural selling or producing, and that really is causing much more of that poverty in the South. Chiapas is the poorest state in Mexico. 74.6% of the people who live in Chiapas are considered to be in poverty. There are 62 indigenous languages in Mexico, and the Latin American Public Opinion Project, which was done by Vanderbilt University, showed that for schooling, and this is with that difference between the full indigenous and the indigenous and Spanish origin mixed population in Mexico, there are 3.5 more years of education for someone who is considered more white, meaning that Spanish and indigenous mix, compared to someone who is considered more dark, more of that indigenous population, meaning that not only are there the issues of maybe more poverty in the South, because a lot more indigenous live in the South, or there might be issues of the government not, respecting the way they would use their farming techniques because of international trade deals or considering their natural resources. It's also is an issue in education with really that lag, that 3.5 years is a pretty big difference in the bigger picture.